and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Hi, everybody. I'm Janine, and my sister Jackie is also in the studio today, as is the usual. And so this is number 154 in our 1950s Fun Chats. We're delighted you're with us again and can learn more about the times and the events and things that happened in the 1950s. Jackie, how could you introduce our guest today, please?
Well, I want to reiterate that the 1950s is modern history. So look at the banner, purple banner, folks, at the bottom. That says www.whilethewindmillwatch.com. Go there for all sorts of information about our book, about the authors, and about this 1950s Fun Chat. As Janine mentioned, we have been doing quite a few of these. 154, I believe, this time, and we started September 21, 2 years ago. So. On the upper right-hand corner is a picture of the book that this is based on. It's kind of the Fun Chat is an offshoot of that book. And we have, for you today, another interesting guest. Mm-hmm. So what child, and even some adults, would not like a candy kitchen as a destination? Along with a deep appreciation for history, Lynn Ochiltree's journey to the candy kitchen, an ice cream parlor, soda fountain, and confectionery shop located in Wilton, Iowa, did not proceed in a direct line. Born in 1968, Lynn's bachelor's degree in history from Simpson College first led to a 30-year career as a funeral director. Big jump, huh? And in 1996, he founded the Ochiltree Funeral Service in Winterset, Iowa. After selling his successful business in 2019, Lynn and his wife, Brenda, purchased the Candy Kitchen and devoted themselves entirely to their new venture, working tirelessly 7 days a week to ensure its continued legacy. And Lynn will tell us about that legacy soon. Their son, Christian, a sophomore at Wilton High School, represents the seventh generation of the family to be raised in Wilton. The family can trace their roots back to the area's first settler, who was also named Christian. It was Christian Maroff. So, Lynn, welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Yes. Thank you.
So, after retiring from the funeral business, what led you to acquire the Candy Kitchen?
Well, actually, we purchased the Candy Kitchen about 4 years before we sold the funeral home. So we were actually back and forth quite a bit anyway, because my parents still live here. All my mom's family of 7 live here. My dad's family of 3 live here in Wilton. Both sides of our family have deep roots here, and hardly anyone's ever left. But we had the Candy Kitchen since 2015, and it was really just to save it from being sold on the auction block and taken apart piece by piece.
Well, Lynn, that Wilton Candy Kitchen has an amazing history, and it goes back far beyond the 1950s. And can you take us back to the origination of the Candy Kitchen, please?
Actually, it starts in the 1850s when the building was built. It's the oldest building remaining in Wilton, which was built in 1856. Construction of the town really started in the spring of 1856, and we suspect that this is one of the very first buildings built in that time period in the 1850s. So in 1856, it was started as a general store, we believe, and the building still remains today intact, pretty much the way it was back then. And then in 1860, a gentleman came, a Wilton pioneer came in 1860, and he started a confectionery here in this business, or in this building. That traveled through into the 1870s. And then we suspect that the soda fountain business started about 1882. There's a little bit of murkiness between 1877 to 1882, but we suspect it had been a restaurant at that time, continuing into the soda fountain business, which continued all the way through till today.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this it is still happening today. So tell us about the Candy Kitchen and how it changed after World War II. And what are your thoughts on the post-war business?
During the war, Gus Noplis came in 1910, and he had established the Candy Kitchen name in 1910, reopening the store that had been closed previously a few months around 1908 or 1909. He opened the store as the Candy Kitchen, and he ended up falling in love with the Wilton girl. And he had two children, Leo and George, and both of them served in the military during World War II. When they were discharged, both of them came back to work in the Candy Kitchen. One of the brothers, Leo, ended up out in Dexter, Iowa, but the other son, George, remained here in the Candy Kitchen. After the war, there was a lot of things that happened here in the Candy Kitchen. One of the first things that happened was George married Thelma Noplis, who had been an employee here at the Candy Kitchen since she was 10 years old. So George married Thelma. George and Thelma got married in 1949, and they proceeded to have all of their children in the 1950s. All four of their children were born in the 50s. And what happened after the war here in the Candy Kitchen was a transition of ownership. That father, Gus, gave the Candy Kitchen ownership to his sons, Leo and George. And then George bought out Leo, and then Leo subsequently went to Dexter. George got married, had their family through the 50s. But there was a lot of things that happened here in the 50s, which is interesting. When you had contacted me, I thought, well, the 50s really is kind of an interesting time frame for the Candy Kitchen, because in 1951, a new soda fountain was placed in the Candy Kitchen. And that was the third soda fountain which had been placed in the Candy Kitchen since the beginning of its history. That 1951 soda fountain still remains here today and is used every day here at the Candy Kitchen. Also in 1951, an ice cream machine was purchased, a new ice cream machine, state-of-the-art Taylor ice cream machine, and that was purchased the same year in 1951. That remained in use until 2015, and it was retired. So it still is in our museum, and it still would work if we hooked it up, I'm sure. It wouldn't be as efficient as the new machine that we have. However, the 1950s really show those. I think those things show that when George came home from the war and married, he was spending money and investing in the business, which his father hadn't done for many years because there was no money during the war. And it was just a really simple business that they ran using all the equipment they had from previous years. So it was a boom for the Candy Kitchen. I think a boom for American economy, I think, after the war. So I think we see that reflected here at the Candy Kitchen as well.
That is true.
Lynn, when the Candy Kitchen originated, were the owners making homemade candies, or did they purchase candies?
They did.
Okay.
In the beginning of the business, yes, in the 1860s, of course, that was all made here in the building. And when Gus Noplis had the operation, he was making candies here. Actually, where I'm sitting right now is kind of the back of the building, and he would have right behind me, but there was a screen that was here, and he would have made candies right behind me. And this would have been his operation. So in front of us was a soda fountain and the place for folks to sit and to relax in the restaurant. And behind me was where the candies were made until about 1940. I think about 1946, 47, they made all of their candies here in the Candy Kitchen. However, that changed after the war. They chose to not make candies. Some of the problems had arose during the war. There was of course, rationing of sugar and supplies, which caused them to be able to not make as much as they wanted to or needed to. However, I think after the war into the 1950s, you do see, I believe, a real change in our economies. There was a boom in business. A lot of the function of World War II production was parlayed into efficiencies in industry. And I think that you see a lot of that change also into the candy industry, where you see a lot of candy companies taking some of that innovation and using it. So it wasn't as efficient to make your own homemade candies as it was to buy some of them. So I think that change really happened because of that boom into the 50s.
Do you recall what brands of candy that they brought in, or what kinds of candy? Were they were all wrapped? Were they not? Were they?
I think I don't have a real great a great inventory of the historic products that they would have provided. I do know for sure that they did have, a lot of the candy bars, like the Baby Ruth. They had Hershey bars, mostly those type of early brands. I don't know. I think Clark Bar might have been another one that I know that they had.
Okay.
But some of that was kind of lost in time, and unfortunately, that's one of the questions I never asked Thelma when we bought the Candy Kitchen, because she would have remembered some of that stuff. But that's a great. You've given me a great idea that we can put on our Facebook and put out to say, hey, what are the candies you recall from the 1950s?
Yes,
I think we'll do that in honor of you.
Yes. Well, and the prices, I can recall there being nickel candy bars and dime candy bars.
Yeah.
We were only allowed to get nickel ones, much to my dismay.
Yeah.
And do you recall by chance any of those kinds of candy bars that would have been the less expensive kind?
Well, I think most of the candy bars were all, they were all probably a standard price, I would guess, probably like a 6 or 8 ounce candy bar, probably all would have been around that same price in the 1950s. I do know for sure that an 8 ounce Coke was a nickel Coke. You could buy that for a nickel here at the Candy Kitchen. I definitely know that for a fact. So when people come in and they say, now we sell a small Coke for $1, and that's a 16 ounce Coke, they say, well, this used to be 5 cents. And then I always have to, I don't want to correct them too much, but I want to say, well, they actually used a smaller glass. It was about 8 ounces, and it was half the size, and it was a nickel. So yes.
Yeah.
Do you recall if the use of paper straws versus plastic straws back in the 1950s era?
I do know that they, at sometime in the 50s, we still have in our archives some sundae dishes which had paper inserts in them.
Oh yeah.
The paper insert sundae dishes were used a lot in the 1950s. However, today we use all the glass products to present our ice cream to people that stay in our dining room. But yes, there were some paper products used at that time, and I do believe that paper straws were fairly popular back then. But I think they gave way to plastic because plastic held up much better in sipping your drink.
Oh,
In fact, we had a lady come in one day who said, I used to think that paper straws were the way to go, but she says, the dang things just don't work very well.
We used to go to one of the fountains in Bismarck, and I can remember about the final quarter of the drink, whatever it was, a soda or a malt or whatever, that paper straw was so mushed up you could hardly get the drink out.
Or you might have part of your paper straw floating on top of your drink.
Oh, yes, yes.
So Lynn, tell us about gum. Did bubble gum come into being in the 50s?
No, gum was popular in the 20s and 30s. In fact, we have a couple of brands that we provide here today that are from the 20s and 30s. Well, of course, Blackjack. You have Clove.
Oh yeah.
There's I can't say the name of it. It's a lavender flavored gum, and that was definitely in the 1930s.
Interesting.
But as far as bubble gum, like Bazooka bubble gum and all of those types of things, I think that was kind of a trend of the 50s into the 60s with Bazooka. So there were some other products introduced, but there was gum. But when I was little, my aunt, who grew up in the late 40s and 50s, when I asked her for gum, she'd give me paraffin wax and say, "Here, chew on that." That's what we used to chew for gum.
Oh, is that right? Interesting. So was there flat gum sold with baseball cards too?
Yes, gum was definitely, absolutely.
Okay. How about Cracker Jacks? Have you always had Cracker Jacks in your shop?
Well, we have had Cracker Jacks in our shop here over the years. We've had them several times intermittently. It just depends. We shake things up sometimes. We don't have it all the time. But I know they did sell Cracker Jacks in the Candy Kitchen after the war, and we have had them, but they've gotten to be so pricey that it's hard. Anyway, well, that's a whole other conversation. So. Go ahead.
Popcorn or caramel corn? Was that?
No, never had any of that type of thing in here. No, mostly just toffees, chocolates like turtles,
Oh yeah.
and caramels, chocolate covered caramels, toffees, chocolate covered toffees, that type of thing were made here at the Candy Kitchen.
Do you find that most of your customers are those of us from the baby boomers or even earlier? Or is it more the younger generations, our children and our children's children who stop in?
The Candy Kitchen, it's kind of an interesting mix of people. You know, we get traditionally we'll have about 35,000 guests come through our door here, and they're from all over the country. There's a lot of people, like you that were from the 50s, 60s that remember this type of business, and they bring their families in to experience it. But we get a lot of people who are traveling through that, you see ice cream advertised somewhere, see ice cream on the internet, they're interested.
Okay.
But it's a wide variety of people. What's fun to us is that we get to help educate a whole new generation about what a soda fountain is. For me to like make someone a Coke, you make a Coke, and as a soda jerk, you make the Coke. You don't just get the Coke. And I had a lady yesterday, she said, make a Coke. What do you mean, make it? I said, well, I make it. I'll make it right here for you. In fact, if you want to come behind the counter, I'll have you make it. But
Yeah.
she was shy, but I think that the variety of customers we have, about 60% of our clientele comes from New York to Los Angeles. We have people from all over the country. But there's a lot of travelers, families that come to experience it and see it. They may not even know what they're walking into, but it's always fun to be able to show them something. But yet there's a lot of people just like you that say, oh, I remember going to so-and-so's drugstore. I remember. And I think it's really interesting that we're living in a time where there will be no one that remembers going to a soda fountain at some point here. It was a prevalent thing. There were 3 in Wilton at one time in the 1950s. There were 2 others prior to that, going back to the 1860s. It was something that was very prevalent in every community.
Yes. Going back to those Cokes, did you make flavored Cokes too, or do you still make flavored Cokes? What kinds?
Well, we can make, of course, people always say, well, what's the most popular? And I usually say a cherry Coke is probably the most popular soda, followed closely by a Green River, lime and lemon, and followed then by a Pink Lady. Pink Lady and Green River are probably intimately equal. Pink Lady is a vanilla, cherry, and strawberry soda.
Okay.
But as far as different kinds of Cokes, I mean, we have 21 different flavors of syrups that we make here in the store. We don't buy them from a supplier, we make them. So all of that is produced by hand in an old milk can that's been used since 1910. So I make those syrups, and so you could have a pineapple Coke, you could have a lime Coke, that's popular. Of course, a vanilla Coke, orange Coke, made a banana Coke. Yeah.
Mom would always order a chocolate Coke if she could.
Yep.
Were people interested in that?
Very popular, a very popular one. Yep.
So that the Coke taste of the Coke depends upon the quality of the water. Do you use distilled water, or do you use just tap water?
We use just regular water, no filter.
Okay.
We're very blessed that we have really good water here in the community, and a lot of people will just drink our water and say, boy, this is really great filtered water.
And it's not filtered.
I tell my friend who works at the water plant, I always say, well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because it's great water. But having the water goes through a thing called a carbonator. And so we have the carbonation added to the water in the carbonator. It looks like a little pig, so I call it the pig. And it sits under our counter. And every once in a while, you hear the little pig go off and make a noise, regenerating itself. But that's introduced. That carbonation is introduced to the water, and then that little the carbonator then holds about 2.5 gallons of water that regenerates from time to time, and then we use that to pull the soda.
Well, you are on your way of starting a museum there.
Yes.
Associated with your business.
Yeah.
Yes. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So my family, like I said, goes back to the original settler of Wilton. In 1849, our family came to Wilton. Wilton was founded as a town in 1855. That's my mom's side of the family. My dad's side of the family, we were here in 1854. So both sides very deep in the community. When I was a young boy, my great grandma would visit with me, and we learned a lot. I learned a lot of history, and I fell in love with history because of my great grandma, and that was what I ended up studying at college. And she died when I was 12 years old, and her death inspired me to be a funeral director. So that's a whole other story. Her life really inspired my whole life. But having the Candy Kitchen, we definitely have a business that is amazing, and there's so much history that goes back parallel to the Candy Kitchen in the community. We decided that we would establish a nonprofit, which we did in 2019. The nonprofit is then going to be the vehicle we'll use to hold the archives we have, which is about 250,000 artifacts connected to the area, a lot of which has been collected by me since I was 12 years old. A lot of things have been donated. Of course, we have a huge collection of things related to the Candy Kitchen, soda fountain history. We have a lot of railroad history because Wilton was a railroad town. But yes, so we started the nonprofit so that we would have a vehicle to be able to preserve and maintain this massive archives we have. We're looking to build a facility next door to the Candy Kitchen, which will hold the archives. County does not have an archives to speak of. There might be some sections in a library here or there, but as far as a real permanent place for that type of thing, we don't have that. So what a great thing to have right next to the Candy Kitchen, so people can learn about the history of soda fountain. They could come in and have an ice cream, and then maybe learn a little bit about history. So
yes.
Tell us about your attire.
My attire? Oh,
yeah,
sure. Sure.
So
bow tie. So I was telling you this yesterday, so I'll tell it again. We were talking about wearing my bow tie today, and I usually will wear a bow tie, and the boys that work at the Candy Kitchen will wear a white shirt and a bow tie, and the girls will always wear a red shirt. Thelma always wanted people to wear red. She loved red, so Thelma wore red, and we wear white and black with a bow tie. But Gusnopoulos always wore a bow tie, and so it's kind of become our signature thing that we maintain that history. He wore a bow tie every day he came into the Candy Kitchen, and it was just something that we thought, out of respect for him as the founder of the Candy Kitchen, that we would continue that tradition. In fact, if you go to our website, you'll see in the website, when you transition from a page to another page, rather than have a little spinny thing or a clock, we had them design a bow tie which flashes until we go to the next page.
Cool. Do you think that the bow tie was important for Gus to wear every day because it was a tradition that came with his culture, or was this his way of presenting himself to the public?
I think it was a way of presenting himself to the public. But if you look at publicity from the 1950s, you'll see a lot of people wear a little paper hat, which we don't wear.
Oh, yes.
And they will have a bow tie and a jacket. He always wore a jacket as well over top of his white shirt. So that was kind of the attire of a sodager. And I think that really kind of developed in the 1950s.
Okay.
So,
Lynn, the Wilton Candy Kitchen, as I understand, is on the National Historic Register. Is that correct? Okay. Correct. What does it take to be tapped as one of those members of the National Historic Register?
Well, of course, that happened pre-us, but in I'll go back a little bit. Thelmanopoulos really is she's the daughter-in-law of George, the son of the Candy Kitchen owner and founder, Gusnopoulos. George married Thelma, and Thelma was tenacious, and she was very pro-Wilton, and anything she could do to promote Wilton and to promote the Candy Kitchen, she would do. I always said if I ever ran for political office, I would have Thelma be my campaign manager, because she never said no, but she always got things done. So in 1993, I believe the Candy Kitchen was placed on the historic register. And I don't know what her inspiration for doing that was, but someone, I believe, had suggested to her that maybe that's something that they could think about doing. And so she hired a historian, and the historian worked closely with her and they developed a plan, and they were able to get the Candy Kitchen on the historic register in 1993. Now, when you put something on a historic register, you have to document lots of history, and you have to get historical references to the business. And in this case, they asked for personal recollections of the Candy Kitchen, which are now documented in the application for the historic register. So we have people who came to the Candy Kitchen on opening day in 1910 who are still living in 1993, who they documented their stories. So we have some great history of the Candy Kitchen.
Nice.
And we have some history of the Candy Kitchen even predating the Candy Kitchen. Before, there were several people who knew about it before it was the Candy Kitchen. So Thelma's inspiration to do that really was had some amazing foresight. And so when that designation was placed, then she got the idea of taking these stories even further, and why not write a book? So in 1996, she wrote her first history of Wilton, which was just a very loosely put together book of some stories and recollections based on these interviews they did for the historic preservation nomination. And then she further went to the point of getting the book published again in 2005 as a real book that now is a part of the Wilton's history. So, yeah, so she did definitely have that inspiration. It turned into something pretty great.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like as if she was a dynamic lady.
Yes.
She was dynamic. Yes.
In finding a historian to work with in order to get all this information together, does this historian have to have credentials in order or to have the application be submitted or not?
Well, this particular person who did the work for the Candy Kitchen is still a friend of mine. Her name is Jan Full, and Jan was based out of Iowa City, and she had a historical firm. Historical research firm that was hired to do lots of different projects, and Thelma hired her to do this project. Now, yes, it's possible for anyone to do the application for this type of work, but it does help a little bit to have someone who can navigate all that needs to be done, because there's a little bit of bureaucracy involved with it, and a lot of stealthy work to do some investigating. Yes, anyone can do it. But as far as being rejected or approved, it's probably likely you'll get rejected if you don't have some experience in doing it, because they're pretty particular on how the applications are filed.
Yep, understandable. I want to go to your ice cream in the soda fountain.
Yeah.
Are there ice cream novelties that were offered, such as sundaes or sodas that were offered in the 50s that you still offer now, or have you branched out from that?
So our entire menu is pretty much based off of a menu that we have had in existence probably since the 1930s. We certainly can make any variety of sundae that you want. We have, a multitude of toppings, probably 35 or 40 different toppings. But this mainstay of the Candy Kitchen, the tin roof, has been offered for many years. The chocolate jersey. Go ahead.
Can you explain to people, our viewers, what the tin roof is? I think I have an idea, but it'd be good to know.
Here at the Candy Kitchen, the tin roof is chocolate ice cream, homemade chocolate syrup, marshmallow topping, and Spanish peanuts. That is a tin roof.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And that's been offered as a mainstay for many years.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that lots of people get is the chocolate jersey, which is vanilla ice cream topped with chocolate, homemade chocolate syrup, and then topped with malt powder. That's been a mainstay for many years.
Mm-hmm. What is the most requested ice cream treat that you offer?
Turtle sundae. Well, turtle sundae or a chocolate malt. Those would probably be chocolate malt hedges out the turtle sundae a little bit.
And made with vanilla ice cream versus chocolate ice cream in the
homemade chocolate syrup. We make the syrup the same way they made the syrup 100 years ago. We make it right over a stove, just like the syrups for the sodas. We do nothing different than what they did.
How wonderful to have those recipes and be able to still use them. That is tremendous. That
So, it's interesting. You can buy everything that we provide, but I'm just a little bit tight enough that I choose to make it because it is probably a little bit less expensive. But ultimately, the joy of being able to say to someone, "Yeah, we made this and we make it," is pretty special. So,
yes. Well, that's perhaps one of the reasons people come to you too.
Perhaps.
Because it's unique. Yeah. I guess that would draw me thinking,
yeah.
Oh, this is homemade. Yeah.
Now, there's a few things that we buy that they used to make, but mostly everything we try to do is Brenda and I never intended to come here to be the focus of the Candy Kitchen. The Candy Kitchen is its own focus, and all that we wanted was we never wanted to take light off that focus of the Candy Kitchen. We just wanted to provide customers a similar experience that they would have gotten 50 years ago.
If the opportunity was given to you again, would you have purchased the Wilton Candy Kitchen?
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't something that was on our radar. We have to credit Brenda with the inspiration to purchase it. Of course, I was always interested in owning it when the opportunity arose, but I never really pushed for it because at that time we were very busy running our business, had lots of things going on. And when Thelma said that George had told her as he was dying that you should just tear the building down, it was falling into the alley. That's a whole other story. We had a huge renovation done on the building in 2018, but she said we should just tear it down. And Brenda looked at her and she said, Thelma, we can't let you do that. And Thelma really was struggling with what to do with it. But I do know what she wanted. She wanted it to continue in a similar way, her beloved Candy Kitchen that she had invested so much of her life into since she was 10 years old, and her husband since he was 6. So, yes, I would do it again. But Brenda is the one that we must credit for saving it because she said, oh, Thelma, we can't let you do that.
And Brenda is your wife.
Brenda's
wife. Yes. Tell us about this renovation then of that original building.
Yeah. So in 1856, when the building was built, it's just a wood frame building. It's very simply constructed, just a period wood frame building from the 1850s. And it was built on sod, on beams. The basement was dug out later, or a crawl space. I wouldn't call it a basement. It's just a crawl space. But it does not have a functioning full foundation around the entire building. We didn't know that until we started to do some work for the renovation. But it was determined that the west wall, which faces the front door, and all the way back on the north wall, there's no foundation. And that's why the building was settling and was tipping into the alley. In fact, the upper story was about 8 to 10 inches further to the north than the lower portion of the building. And you can definitely stand outside and you can see the building. So make a long story short, when they did the historic preservation, it was part of the Iowa Economic Development where they give frontage grants for communities. Lots of communities have had it done. I know Winterset had it done, and I think Granger did it. I think different communities around have done this. Ottumwa, I know, has done it. So what happens is the property owner has to agree to the city doing the contract with the contractor, and they come in and just work on the frontage of the building. They have a 7-year lien on the building where they don't allow you to only do what is allowed within historic preservation. So if I wanted to change the color of the building, I still have to give them some heads up about that. But so what happened was the city came in and we did this project, and they were able to put a foundation in the front of this building and save the Candy Kitchen.
Great. Were there ever living quarters in the building?
No, the upper story of the building was built as a lodge hall, and so when this building was built in 1856, the Oddfellows Lodge had its lodge hall above the Candy Kitchen. The lodge hall for that organization remained up there until about 1920, and in 1920, then, if you know about World War I. The American Legion was founded in 1919. And so the American Legion post here in Wilton was originally going to be named after the first person to die in the war, who was Gus Nopolis's first cousin. Died in service. He was from Wilton, and that's how it worked. Posts were named, same with the Civil War posts, they were named after the first person to die in service from that community. So the post was going to be named after Gus Nopolis's first cousin who had died. And at that time, he offered to have the post upstairs here at the Candy Kitchen. So the Oddfellows had moved out. He offered for them to come in. And so the Legion was upstairs until about 1932. And after 1932 is when it was turned into an apartment. So there were people living in the apartment up there through the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Well, you're certainly a walking encyclopedia of Wilton and of your candy company. We certainly thank you for all that knowledge.
Yes. Viewers, you've had the most wonderful opportunity to hear the story of the Wilton Candy Kitchen in Wilton, Iowa. It's on the National Historic Register. Perhaps you've been there, made a stop on your way to and fro from border to border, coast to coast, and even in Iowa, where we treasure businesses like that. This has been a great story to hear, Lynn. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Jackie, can you close us out today?
Viewers, please do go to www.While the Windmill Watched and check out all of the fun chats. This will be, Lynn's will be on when? The 19th of August?
Well, this is streaming on August 19th.
19th, okay. All right, great. So we will be there. But before that, there are plenty of other local history or sometimes local, but recent history of people. So tell your friends about this fun chat, even your relatives. This is the 1950s fun chat. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.